name is Max VENTURA from East Bay Pesticide Alert. We've been working since the mid-90s, originally Sonoma Pesticide Alert. And in 2005, in January, we discovered there was this program starting. It was very troubling and it was very confusing. Friends of Saucil Creek was being represented as saying, we want the city of Oakland to do an exemption to the ban on pesticide use by the city of Oakland. And we went, what? We went, wait, we've got to get involved here. We asked for a seat at the table at a hearing in January on this before we had the idea of the massive tree decimation plant. We were refused a seat at the table, but we put together very good packets of information, including about pesticides already being used in the hills by UC, which was the agency pushing very hard to get the city of Oakland to be using pesticides in the hills where they had not been for over 9 years. So, sounds like, what's this about and how does it have anything to do with the trees? Well, so we went to the hearing, we found out that we were excluded, the ones who'd been working for many years on pesticides issues, but who was there to promote the program in its U-shape. Well, of course, it was Jean Kwan and her aide, Sue Piper. It was Tom Klatt of the Office of Emergency Preparedness at UC. Now it's, Sal Janito, I believe is his name. It was Nancy Brownfield, since dead of cancer. She was called the IPM Integrated Pest Management Specialist for the East Bay Regional Park District. And we discovered through calculations that even taking into account added acreage over the years, under her tenure, the pesticide use dramatically increased. There was a representative from PG&E. There was a representative from EBMUD. They all have been cutting trees also and using pesticides over the years. This was back January 2005. And the crowning jewel, was Jake Sig of the California Native Plant Society. He was pushing hard for pesticide use. He was saying, I've used pesticides for over 50 years. We need to have them in our arsenal, was his quote. So this lays a little backdrop for part of the program. We only later found out how we thought what they were talking about was the occasional trees that actually get cut in areas with a lot of public access, trails and so on, or areas where kids are jumping up some hills like at Briones. That's what we thought it was about, with the occasional tree that was actually being cut for actual safety reasons. And so then we were saying there's never a use for pesticides. Here is the list of alternatives. Okay, but anyhow, now we all know what it's about. Best calculations seem to be about 450,000 trees or so from our East Bay Hills, our lungs, and pesticide use. People are talking about 10 years, but actually because the plan is in stages, here's what it can look like. The first stage in an area, pesticide use for at least 10 years in that area. Later on, the second stage, and the clock starts back again, another 10 years for that area, at least, of pesticide use. Then, maybe around year 10 or so, a third stage, and then the clock starts again, another 10 years. So we could be looking at a minimum. We don't know the exact answers of exactly how long. The point is that there's been deception beginning to end. And you just need to know that. It's all about deception all the time. I ran into Jean Kwan flyering for this event at Diamond Park, which has been decimated. A bunch of old redwood trees just destroyed for another native plant restoration project. And so I handed her, I said, I hope you'll come and learn about the danger of removing the trees. What was her response? As she waved and smiled, she said about the trees, you lose some, you save some. That was Jean Kwan, the city councilwoman behind a lot of this program, later mayor. So there's the backdrop. David THEODOROPOULOS is a conservation biologist whose book many of us have begged him to have reprinted.
Working on it.
Yay! And he's going to give us a really big and global view and somewhat more local view as well of this whole issue of native plant restoration projects, who's behind them, what they're about. So thank you, David, for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
main thing about invasive species is that it's all about nativity, right? What's native to an area. So, like for a little community full disclosure, I was born in Redwood City, and back then there was spaces between the towns. And you would drive down to El Camino to look at the orchards. It was called the Valley of Heart's Delight. And now it's called Silicon Valley. So, an interesting thing about California is that ever since records have begun to be kept, people born here have been outnumbered by people who moved here. So I'd like everybody who was born in California to please raise your hand. Yeah, look around, see? So one of my main messages here is that nativity doesn't matter. It's like I could be sorrowful and bitter about all the the orchards that are gone and how it's crowded and dirty, but the smartest people in the world are moving here. It's this incredible, it's incredible to have grown up here and to see all these wonderful people from every corner of the earth come here. So for all of you who came here from somewhere else, welcome to California. Please join us in trying to build a culture of tolerance and inclusion. So you're Californians now. Don't forget that. Yeah, I probably also should have told you who have moved here, thank you for coming to my homeland, and thank you for bringing your culture and your creativity and your intelligence. It's been quite a ride the last 60 years. Okay, this is my book. It came out about 12 years ago. When it came out, a bunch of academic invasion biologists totally vilified it. They called me a flat earther. I've been called the Antichrist of invasion biology. And now, 12 years later, there's a whole group of academics who are actually actively plagiarizing my work and making a big name for themselves. So I figured, well, plagiarism is the sincerest form of vindication. And now, okay, biology is the most complex thing we know of in the universe. Like people say, it's not rocket science. No, rocket science is simple compared to biology. So I don't really have any super easy answers for you, but if you take home one word from this talk, I want you to remember Monsanto. Every time you hear the phrase invasive species, think Monsanto. There we go. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today, first I'll quickly run down some of the scientific flaws in invasion biology. I call it voodoo ecology. We'll take a close look at what is native, what is this concept of nativity. And then we'll look at some of the big name invaders like Eucalyptus and salt cedar. Then we'll take a look at the underlying causes of invasion, because invaders are symptoms, not cause. We'll take a quick look at the benefits that invasive species have. And I'll show you some examples of true scientific fraud among invasion biologists. And then the extremism of the invasionists, how they become increasingly more extreme, that they never fail to surprise even me, and I've been studying this for decades. Then we'll follow the money. We'll look at the corruption behind this, and if there's, I don't know if there's any, if there's time, we'll take a quick look at the psychology of invader fears and how closely they are related to the psychology of like racism and totalitarian ideologies. And finally, a new model I came up with in integration biology, which is a way of studying the same phenomena that invasion biology studies, but in a non-prejudicial way. And at the end, okay, maybe we'll get to methods of sabotage, and I'm not talking about tree spiking, I'll be talking about the methods that will be used to sabotage your movement by your enemies. Okay, invasive species have been demonized for 40 years. They tell you that they invade, they take over native ecosystems, they cause extinction, they drive native species to the edge. And if we look at the language, it's very interesting because cognitive scientists have been studying how the mind reacts to the use of language. And they find that if you hear or read positive words like clean, good, bright, that will color your thinking and your judgment for the rest of the day. And the same with negative words. Just seeing them in a completely different context can color your thinking. And they've also found that if you're told something that is alarming, that causes you to be fearful, you will automatically tend to believe whatever is told to you after that. It destroys your critical capacities. And as Aristotle said, he said that if a man's heart is agitated by fear, he will see any person in the far distance, he will mistake them for his enemy. And so, in fact, if you're an invasionist, don't mistake me for your enemy, because I'm actually going to be giving you the theoretical tools you need to manage the species you're trying to manage. And also, we also have to not see these species in a fearful way. So let's look at this language. I just hate them. Genetically deviant miscreants. No rightful place on the planet. War on weeds. They can be seen as a cancer, a drastic disease of the landscape. Here we get more war metaphors, locked in combat with unrelenting armies. And the cancer of invasion, life gone haywire. Now, if you read a lot of invasionist writings, you'll be struck by this sort of paranoia. It's like they're as paranoid as tweakers, and they're as chemically dependent as tweakers. So let's compare that with this quote. This was a statement made by Ohlone, Pomo, and Miwok elders, our local native Indians, in a statement opposing the cutting and herbiciding of eucalyptus on the Karkin burial ground. All life is sacred. We oppose the extermination of the trees and plants that have taken root on this sacred burial ground, regardless of whether they are endemic species or relative newcomers. Now, invasionists are so concerned about nativity, I would encourage them to look to the native peoples and try to become native and think like these native peoples themselves. Okay, also beware of false binary choices. We're constantly given this black, white, good, bad, native, non-native, Democrat, Republican, whatever. Avoid them. Be comfortable with ambiguity, because the world isn't black and white. It's ambiguous, and there are continuums. For one example, harm is redefined at will. If a shrub has berries that are eaten by birds, it's harmful because it's competing with the native shrubs for dispersal by birds, and it's using the birds to disperse. If it has no berries, then it's harmful because it does not have food for the birds. That reminds me, in the 60s, one of the early black activists said, "If I stand, I am loitering. If I walk, I am prowling. If I run, I am fleeing." And it's exactly the same mentality in invasion biology. Okay, these are just totally discredited ecological concepts. No modern ecologist believes in the balance of nature. We know for a fact our so-called communities are not communities, they're actually assemblages of species. They aren't tightly co-evolved. The ecological reactions are very plastic, they change rapidly, and climax communities, that's ancient. Okay, these are just a few of the sort of technical reasons. Invasion biology is a pseudoscience. They never have clearly defined their terms. For decades they've been working on this and they can't agree on them, like native, alien, harm. They don't even know what invasion actually means. And okay, non-operational constructs, non-falsifiable, this is like all the technical stuff you'll find in my book. Invasion biology theory is scientifically incoherent and it is completely divorced from the rest of ecology. It tries to overlap a little here and there, but modern ecological thinking is not in line with invasion biology. Okay, native and alien. Invasion biology stands or falls on this. Okay, the grizzly bear, it's on our flag, a symbol of native California. Grizzlies came to California only 50,000 years ago from Eurasia. They came across Beringia. Okay, camels. How many of you know that the entire camel family evolved here in North America? There were many, many species, 24 genera. They radiated to other continents, became completely extinct here. So if they hadn't invaded Eurasia and South America, that entire branch of the tree of life would be extinct. Okay, it's this tree of heaven and ginkgo. There are fossil ginkgos in the rocks in Oregon. They're now restricted to tiny stands in China as well as cultivated ones. Tree of heaven was present here in the tertiary. It's now being killed throughout North America as an invader. Okay, bison, that other great symbol of Native America. Bison came here across Beringia about 2 million years ago. They are immigrants, just like human beings. And then, okay, elephants, mammoths, and mastodons, the elephant family. They have a very similar evolutionary history to ourselves. They originated in Africa, they radiated to the rest of the world. In fact, 13 stocks of these guys made it all, some of them made it all the way to southern South America. They were present right here. There have been mammoth fossils found in the Bay Area. So you can imagine, just 10,000 years ago, or 7,000 years ago, they were walking right through here. They were hunted by the Native Americans. Oh, and again, there are now only 2 endangered species in this family left. Okay, the musk ox, it was present in prehistory in Siberia, became extinct there. It was reintroduced from the musk ox populations in northern North America. It's now naturalized in Siberia. It has come home. It's not an invader. Jaguars used to range all the way up to the tree line before you reach tundra. And they were also present in Europe, in Italy. And in fact, a jaguar was sighted near Monterey in 1814. It's that recent. Lions, how many of you know lions are native right here, the same species. It was a slightly different subspecies, Pantheroleo atrox. They range throughout North America and as far south as Peru. There are hundreds of fossils of lions that have been dug out of the La Brea tar pits. Oh, and they were also present here until just 13 to 10,000 years ago. So the native organisms here would have co-evolved with them. And of course, wild horses, the same species. The horse family evolved here in North America. There were many, many species radiated to the eastern hemisphere, became extinct here. There are only a few species left. They were present here until about 7,500 years ago. Native Americans hunted them. They were reintroduced with the conquistadors, and now they're being killed as invaders in the arid West. They are native. They are a native species. And this is across all phylogenetic groups. For example, this is Aphodius holdereri, which is okay. This is the current native range. It's abundant in sediments 40,000 years ago in the British Isles. Okay, disjunct distributions. These are species that they occur in widely separated places without any individuals in between them, which these species demonstrate the long-distance dispersal of organisms. Okay, well, it's not showing up over here. Melica subulata ranges from Alaska to California and is also in southern Chile. Creosote bush in the American Southwest and Argentina. Serpis validus, North America and Australia. There are Asian steppe weevils that are native here in northeastern Siberia and down here in the southwestern. There are moss species that are disjunct between Colorado and Antarctica. So, okay, dispersal is essential to living beings. For example, oak trees. The oaks, like they say, the acorn doesn't fall far from the tree. Well, blue jays carry them long distances across the landscape and are essential for the transport and regeneration of oak forests. And primates, that's us and our relatives, primates are key seed dispersers in a lot of tropical forests. Okay, see this dense invading monoculture that's invading the meadow. This is the native bracken fern. It's probably probably the single most widely distributed fern in the world. There is no scientific model that can distinguish this from an alien species. That's another key that invasion biology is pseudoscientific. So nature is not balanced, it's imbalanced, it's not tightly integrated, not tightly co-evolved. There are natural outbreaks and crashes like jackrabbits and lemmings. And also a lot of ecosystems we're finding self-organized towards critical states that are subject to catastrophic disturbance, like the buildup of fuel in a forest that leads to a catastrophic wildfire, which then changes to meadow, and then these catastrophic events are actually necessary for maintaining landscape-level biological diversity. And all studies have shown that invasion increases biodiversity in every case, including the oceanic islands. And modern evolutionary theory is now, some evolutionary biologists are suggesting that virtually all species are invaders, and that invasion is an essential process of speciation and evolution. Okay, so we'll check out some of the big name invaders. Purple loosestrife, it's really big in the eastern half of the country, not so big here. It's been called a monster. It's been said to reduce the value of a marshland, to the wildlife value to that of a parking lot. It's said to, it's on the National Invasive Species Council's top 10 invaders, but well, these are the claims. Studies have shown of like 240 plots have found higher bird densities in loosestrife than in native marsh plants. More than 29 species actually use the plant. There's no difference in plant species richness in loosestrife stands, regardless of the density of loosestrife. And some native species are more likely to grow in loosestrife stands. Salt cedar. They claim that it changes the hydrology of rivers, it causes flooding, sedimentation, salinization of the soil. They claim that it crowds out native cottonwood and willow, and that it's driving native species to the edge. Actually, studies have found equal bird and insect diversity and densities in salt cedar stands. Plant species richness in the understory is actually greater than in the native cottonwood. and 90% of the endangered willow flycatcher nest in salt cedar, and there's no evidence of increased flooding. And it's actually a symptom of salinization of the soil and dam building. Okay, so now we get a little more local. I love this. Their silent beauty masks a quiet destructiveness among the most monstrous organisms on Earth. Leaves and bark so toxic they kill all plants around them, ensure there will be no competition. Now remember what I told you about the use of language, right? This is how they get you to hate and fear this plant. Okay, the Sierra Club, in their statement supporting complete removal of eucalyptus, they claim it's flammable, water intensive. They claim it overwhelms native species, dramatically explodes when on fire. Again, they're using this prejudicial language. Yet they contradict themselves in the same document by claiming that that there are lots of native trees in the understory. They also claim Monterey pine are non-native here. They claim that eucalyptus groves have tons and tons of flammable fuel on the ground, which make them a danger. But then they claim that if you cut the eucalyptus and chip it, the chips will rapidly decompose. So they contradict themselves. They claim that natives are naturally fire resistant. Well, eucalyptus is fire resistant, and a lot of natives are fire dependent. They're highly flammable. Some of our chaparral species thrive on fire. It helps them regenerate. And they claim eucalyptus is terrible because it has volatile oils in the leaves. Well, I'm sure all of you have seen our native California laurel with oils in the leaves. So now, since they're supporting clear cuts, I'm going to call them the Sahara Club from here on out. And so you notice, the complete absence of understory in this eucalyptus grove on Mount Sutro, right? I guess it's really killing all those plants around it. And so this is a eucalyptus that grows about a mile from my house. Notice the native coyote brush clustered at the base, and these photographs are of a transect leading up to the eucalyptus trunk. So about 20 feet away, dense introduced grasses. And as we approach the eucalyptus, we start getting native lupins, and the closer we get to the eucalyptus, you can see the eucalyptus leaves there. The closer we get to the eucalyptus, the non-native grasses vanish, and we have 100% cover of native species. These are native bunch grasses. And right at the trunk, we have 100% native species. Now, if you compare that to the complete suppression of native understory by this toxic invader, the California redwood, which invaded California from the north during the tertiary, although I guess the invasionists will be glad that we've cut down about 90% of them. And here, of course, are ones, have they been cut yet?
Oh yeah,
Or,
Diamond Park on Fruitvale Avenue.
Yeah.
Destruction.
Cut. Yeah, in the name of a native plant restoration. Okay, so they say that, of no use to wildlife. I mean, I think 47 species of birds use the tree. There's all sorts of organisms use it, especially my favorite, the monarch butterfly, which prefers eucalyptus groves for its overwintering congregations. I think 17 out of 21 congregations in California are in eucalyptus. And of course, this is what the nativists do to our groves. This was on San Bruno Mountain, and when I saw this, I thought, by their fruits ye shall know them. This is another clear cut over here in the East Bay. And this one reminded me of another phrase from the 60s. We had to destroy the village to save it. Okay, of course they're getting blamed for East Bay fire. This was after the 1991 fire, right? Okay, even then, some people said it was prejudice. I love these pictures from the newspaper at the time, before and after. That is the fire approaching the camera from behind these eucalyptus trees. After the fire, the house is completely destroyed, so is the car. The eucalyptus trees still have their leaves. And this one's even better, it's clearer. The Scripps fire, all these houses completely destroyed. Eucalyptus trees right next to them are fine, they have their leaves. Even their lawns are still green, and the trees and shrubs in their yards are still green. Okay, again. Okay, claims and reality. Yeah, it destroys habitat, no wildlife value, etc. Now, in biology, we have a very technical term for these statements. We call them lies. But of course, some people still like eucalyptus. These are from school children who are doing art to protect them, and I really love it. Oh, they don't show up, they're off the screen. There's these little biohazard signs up in the corner of one of them. Okay, yellow star thistle, another supposed terrible invader, supposedly no use to native wildlife. In 20 minutes, I observed like 23 species of native organisms utilizing the plant. This is a native bumblebee. Yeah, I think this is a halictid bee, and most of you know that a lot of our native pollinators are in trouble, but I encourage everyone to go out in the middle of a star thistle patch in full bloom, midday, spend a half an hour, and you will be amazed at what you see. That's another wild bee. And next up, we have a hunting spider. Now notice the spider is yellow like the flower. He's waiting for these pollinators. We would call this coevolution, except these organisms evolved on completely different continents. And this demonstrates the plasticity of ecological interactions. Here's a skipper. Okay, notice that sharp ecotone. This is dense star thistle, no star thistle on the other side of the barbed wire. Barbed wire can't stop thistle seed. This demonstrates that the presence of the thistle is related to differing past land management on either side of the fence. That one was 1999. This one was 2009. So 10 years later, the star thistle is almost completely gone. This is with no management at all. Star thistle also has, it's an annual. It has roots that can reach, taproots that can reach a meter deep. Now these roots bring nutrients up from the subsoil. They aerate the soil and repair damaged soils. And because we're in a drought, think about those roots. It's an annual, every year. There can be 1,000 of them in a square meter. 1,000 little roots that go down. The roots decay, and they make channels for the rainwater to sink into the deep soil and recharge the groundwater. Okay, just to show you I'm not a total fanatic here, I have a neighbor who keeps horses, and he knows about my work with weeds, and so he said, well, so what about star thistle? Do I have to be worried about it? So I ran down all the ecological benefits, the mice, the deer, the rabbits, all the pollinators, birds and mice eat the seeds. It's a highly beneficial plant in local ecology. But I said, you have horses. So if you see it anywhere on your land, kill it, because it contains a neurotoxin specific to horses. So, you see, I'm not saying you can never weed or never cut anything. I'm not saying there aren't times when it's appropriate, but we need to base those decisions on a site-specific basis without any reference to this bogus, illusory concept of nativity. This is hydrilla. It's supposedly a really bad water weed. I think it's in the top 10 weeds of the world. In Florida, it supports the highest bird species diversity, and it supports the highest fish density and biomass, with 6 times the density and 5 times the biomass as the native Potamogeton water plant. Yeah, I don't know if it has a common name, color, but you've probably heard of killer algae, right? Supposedly destroying the Mediterranean. They call it aquatic astroturf, no use to fish. It's actually they're only small patches. They're associated with nutrient pollution from agriculture, runoff, and sewage. Fish diversity and abundance is greater in Caulerpa than in the native seagrass beds. Epiphytic fauna, that's little critters that live on the plant, diversity is greater than native seagrass. It reduces pollution and actually helps the recovery of native seagrass beds. Okay, cause or symptom. Those of you who want to manage these species, don't treat the symptom, treat the cause.
Right on.
Okay, anthropogenic disturbance, that's human-caused disturbance, which can take many forms. You will usually find this at the basis of these so-called invasions. There's a reason you'll have a population outbreak of an organism. Really important, and is sort of a cryptic disturbance. Cryptic means it's generally invisible. It's not like a bulldozer going through a field. The Indians burned in California frequently. It was essential to maintaining diversity. In fact, with the mammoths gone, the mammoths would knock down trees. It's like those are missing portions of the ecosystem. And human beings were altering it. So quickly, I guess, hydrology, salt cedar, again, associated with dams, with pollution, and also water table changes. Smog. How many of you know that smog deposits nitrogen on the landscape? And the downwind of Los Angeles, the smog is depositing nitrogen into the desert at rates that are equal to agricultural use of nitrogen fertilizer in fields. So of course you're going to have vegetational changes. Traditional people, the displacement of traditional peoples on the land is often at the root of this. Like I said, the California Indians are gone. They're not burning anymore. Most of you have probably heard that in Australia, about all these small mammal extinctions that are supposedly caused by the introduced cats and fox. Actually, we found that many of these small mammal extinctions occurred in areas that the fox and cat never reached, but the extinctions happened after the genocidal displacement of the Aborigines and the loss of Aboriginal land management practices. It's the same story all over the world. In the American Southwest, when Indian farmers were pushed off the land to create protected parks, bird diversity dropped. In the Amazon basin, the Indians' practices increased rainforest diversity. In Africa, traditional peoples have maintained the greatest megafauna left on the planet. In traditional Swiss grazing practices increase alpine meadow diversity. So you see, we can be good citizens of the planet. It's not people, it's industrialism. Okay, beneficial effects of invaders. That's part of the one-sided view you're given of invaders. They see everything as harm, and they only tell you about the harm. They don't tell you about the benefits. This is arundo and water hyacinth. Yeah, 2 of the supposedly the worst weeds in the world. Okay, dense stands of these, again, are associated with nutrient pollution, sewage runoff, agricultural runoff. In fact, throughout the world, in many places, they use these plants to clean up sewage. They can clean up arsenic, cadmium, lead, even uranium. Water hyacinth chopped up in water can remove cadmium down to safe levels for drinking within a few hours.
Wow.
And both are being used as biofuel crops. And some so-called invaders are actually very profitable crops. We have kudzu, St. John's wort, Japanese knotweed, and Artemisia. Okay, Artemisia annua, it's the source of the most important new anti-malarial drug in decades. It's active against like quinine-resistant strains. St. John's wort, multi-million-dollar crop, retrovirus inhibitors, antidepressant. Japanese knotweed, richest source of resveratrol, which is one of the substances in red wine that makes it good for you. I mean, anti-cancer, anti-inflammatory, cardioprotective, neuroprotective against Alzheimer's. It's like, I should get some of this stuff. Kudzu, source of the world's most expensive starch and a source of an anti-alcohol treatment. And again, the Indian connection. I know a Cherokee woman who lives in a kudzu bale house. She makes her living making kudzu products like soap and jellies, and she makes her traditional Cherokee baskets with kudzu stems. So again, it's like, get the invasionists, get native. Okay, the boll weevil monument. The only agricultural pest that has had a monument erected in its honor, the plaque says, in profound appreciation of the boll weevil and what it has done as the herald of prosperity, this monument was erected by the citizens of Enterprise, Alabama. Because when the boll weevil came in, it destroyed their monoculture, cotton agriculture economy. It forced them to diversify, which protected their soils. Their soils were being destroyed by this monoculture, and it was a herald of prosperity. Okay, invasion can help in endangered species. These are just a few of the endangered species that have naturalized in safe new habitats, and of course, Monterey pine is being killed as an invader. Now, I would say that those stands of naturalized stands of endangered species are actually the best case scenario in conservation. So always never forget, when war comes, truth dies. So this is some scientific misconduct. In almost every single paper in the scientific journals in the last 20 years, you've seen these two claims, and they're trumpeted throughout the media, that invasive species are the second greatest threat to biodiversity and the second greatest cause of extinction. There are no data to back this up. E.O. Wilson pulled it out of his hat. He just made it up. It's unconscionable. And I just have to say, shame on you, Ed. Shame on you. Come clean. Come clean. And also, invasive species cost $137 billion a year. Completely bogus. If you read the original paper, I think it was Bioscience by David Pimentel and his associates at Cornell, it is a fraud. He is making up numbers out of thin air. This does not reflect actual money spent on these at all.
Money that the chemical companies spend.
Oh, yeah, I guess the chemical companies. In fact, I wonder if he. Okay. Anyway, so just to show how bogus his methods are, I used his exact methods, applied them to the dreaded zebra mussel, which is supposedly a big problem in the Great Lakes, and I came up with $11 trillion of benefit from this invader because it cleaned the polluted water in Lake Erie, and it increased the catch of the native yellow perch by 5-fold. It's been tremendously beneficial. This is a scan from the peer-reviewed Journal of Ecological Restoration, published by the University of Wisconsin. It's about buckthorn, which is supposed to be an invader in the Midwest. You can see research reveals that the soil under buckthorn may be nitrogen rich and devoid of soil microfauna. Now, these also are direct scans from this article, and you can see that buckthorn was colonized faster than the natives, and it reached the microarthropod levels, reached higher levels than any of the natives except cherry. The mesostigmata and columbolids reached higher densities in buckthorn, and you can't see the numbers for Shannon diversity, but Shannon diversity of these microarthropods was equivalent, and but that's a technical measure of biological diversity. So again, devoid of soil microfauna in a peer-reviewed scientific journal. I mean, when I read this article, I thought to myself, am I the only person on the planet who actually read this? I mean, did the authors even read it? And I have to say, shame on the University of Wisconsin for publishing this. Okay, so scientific misconduct. Okay, it includes making misleading statements. We've seen a lot of those this evening. It includes the omission of material facts. They never tell you about the benefits. That is an omission of a material fact. Now, if you omit a material fact when you sell your house or you sell securities, you are guilty of fraud and you can do jail time. I am proposing that we start holding the scientists and bureaucrats responsible for what they're doing. Yeah, as Max said, it's a culture of deception, and we have to start holding them accountable.
How can we do that?
Let's see, okay, extremism. Remember the old saying, if you fight monsters, be careful lest you become a monster. Okay, this is the Monterey cypress, iconic plant. These two small stippled areas in the Monterey Peninsula and Point Lobos, just a few hundred acres. These are the world's only wild native stands of Monterey cypress. The cypress is being exterminated as an invader in New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, and right here in the Bay Area as a non-native. Again, these naturalized stands are the best case scenario in conservation. The naturalization of an endangered species in safe new habitat, and to destroy them is criminally insane. Okay, these little dots, those are the world's only stands of the Monterey pine. Just these tiny areas. Now, these original native stands are now infected with a canker disease. In some stands, 90% of the trees are dead. Some biologists believe that these stands may be headed for extinction. As you well know, Monterey pine is being killed right here in the East Bay as a non-native invader. It's also being killed in New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, and South America. Yeah, in state parks, okay. Again, best case scenario. So, well, okay, the Monterey pine is outside of its original range. The invasionists, extremism, they keep spiraling into this paranoia. They are now actually opposing the planting of native plants within their own range. Like if you took California poppy from one valley and planted it in the next valley over, they call this non-local stock, and that it's genetic pollution. Now, I was at a meeting of the Society for Conservation Biology. There was a special session in San Jose some years ago, and this one fellow described how on one of their preserves there was an endangered hemizonia, and they brought in seeds from another population to help boost the numbers. The resulting plants, because of this infusion of new genes, became much more robust and were spreading, then they decided, no, this was an invader, it was the wrong ecotype, so now they're weeding them out. It's like, you can't, I couldn't make this stuff up. It's like, you know, I don't have to exaggerate what the invasionists are doing. They are so outside the pale. Okay, mountain goats in Yellowstone. There's populations to the west of Yellowstone and to the north. The northern populations were from introduction by hunters because they wanted to have mountain goats to hunt. The park's official policy is that if the mountain goat enters the park from the west, this will be a native. If it enters from the north, they will be killed as invaders.
What if they enter from the south or the east?
Well, we'd have to take some down there. Okay, so now you have to think about this genetic pollution concept. At this special session at the Society for Conservation Biology, there were biologists from Cold Spring Harbor who were promoting this idea of genetic pollution and keeping local stocks pure. Now, for those of you who don't know history, Cold Spring Harbor in the early part of the 1900s was the center where the eugenics record office was. These are the people who helped implement the mandatory sterilization of so-called inferior people, and they were trying to prevent immigrants. And Adolf Hitler actually sent people to America to study what they were doing, as well as our Indian reservations, and he used these ideas in his construction of the Holocaust and the final solution. Okay, so as we've seen, they promote the killing of native species, endangered species. They're actually actively seeking to prevent translocation of endangered species to new habitats. They're preventing introduction of new crops. In fact, they even oppose biological control of invasive species. They claim that, oh, well, the biological control is yet another species we're introducing. That's a danger. Now, biological diversity, nature has been likened to a great library. So I consider these people to be the book burners in our libraries of diversity. Okay, so now we're going to follow the money. I think I'm running out of time here. Okay, the invasionists have their own magazines, Wildland Weeds. This is all about destroying invaders, as you can see. Yeah, the charter advertisers, CPRO, Griffin, Dow AgroSciences, American Cyanamid, Timberland, Helena, Herbicide Manufacturers. This is a disgrace. How bad does this have to get before we call on it? Okay, here in California, the California Exotic Pest Plant Council, I think they're now the Invasive Species Council, founding board member was Melroy Jackson, who was a Monsanto employee. His job was to promote the use of herbicide in the West. It's like, how bad does this have to get? And again, Cal Epsi, Monsanto, Dowie Lanco, Wilbur Ellis, herbicide manufacturers.
California Native Plant Society.
No, that's the Cal Epsi, the Exotic Pest Plant Council, now renamed. Okay, I went to a Cal Epsi meeting back in the 90s. Yeah, this was a Monsanto booth there pushing herbicides. Now, yeah, think of what's happened to environmentalism. 50 years ago, we were fighting against pesticides, clear cuts, bulldozers, chainsaws, and now they're telling us that wild plants and animals are the threat to nature, and that the cure is pesticides, chainsaws, and bulldozers. One guy actually said that, well, it's really hard to convince the public that a sweet singing bird or a pretty flower is more dangerous than bulldozers. And you have to ask yourself, who does this serve? Remember, they pay a lot of smart people a lot of money to figure out how to sabotage your movement. Okay, extermination programs are frequently really harmful. The Murex program, which was to spray the South to get rid of the fire ant, years later they found out they actually helped the fire ant spread by killing the native ants, which were competing with it. Tiger mosquito control, they spent $1 billion in today's dollars, spraying DDT all over the South, total failure. Gypsy moth spraying, another failure, caused local extinction of butterflies. And in New Zealand, right now, they're doing massive aerial drops of compound 1080. It's sodium fluoroacetate, I think. And in order to kill supposedly non-native predators, and they're actually having big die-offs of native species. Okay, check the corporate colonization of Big Enviro. So why is the Sahara Club and the Nature Conservancy promoting this? Well, as you can see, Big Enviro, big E environmentalism, don't trust it. Never give your money or support to any of the big national environmental organizations. They've been totally colonized by the corporations.
Yeah.
Give your money locally to people who are really doing something. Okay, the corporate state, Obama has put in a bunch of Monsanto people and lobbyists into government positions. I mean, in the Monsanto people in the USDA and the FDA, and before Elena Kagan was nominated for the Supreme Court, she argued before the Supreme Court for Monsanto against farmers, and now she's sitting on that court. Okay, it looks like we're running out of time, so let's just say that well, this is all just a bunch of technical stuff about the psychology of prejudice. It was like I spent about 10 years into working on my book. I said, well, I better look at this because this language seems a little xenophobic to me. And I found something like over 40 parallels in concept and idea between invasion biology and racist ideologies and xenophobic ideologies. It's a really scary subject. You'll find out things about the way we think and our species that you would rather not know.
Can you give it in a nutshell?
In a nutshell, it's really, really bad.
The N-word.
Okay, now we get to the big scary N-word. People hate me for bringing this up, but this is Adolf Hitler shaking hands with Alvin Seifert. Seifert was put in charge of the Third Reich's program. He was assembling teams of botanists who were going around the German countryside, getting rid of foreign plants to purify the fatherland. Now, that was actually the origin of the anti-invader movement as an organized thing that would go around killing things because they're not native. Now, of course, some biologists had noticed, and Darwin talked about invasive species, but that was when it became organized. It was, as we've seen, it has roots in the American eugenics movement. Even today, there are white supremacist groups who are using the invasive species idea to proselytize. I think their websites have been taken down by the FBI, but like National Vanguard and some of these other really white supremacist sites were saying, see, the environmentalists are on our side because they're getting rid of these foreign species and we want to get rid of these foreign mud people or whatever they call them. Okay, yeah, again, AstroTurf activists funded by the herbicide industry. Yeah, they're spreading the dangerous message. So now I got to use the big scary F word. These are facts. Okay? We can't sweep them under the rug. I've taken so much flack for pointing this stuff out, saying, well, if you say the word Nazi, you've lost the argument, or it's hyperbole. No, these are facts. We can't ignore them. So if there are any invasionists here who object to my pointing out their origin in Nazi Germany, their ongoing connection with ideologies of race hatred and xenophobia, their connection with the herbicide industry, I'll make you guys a deal. If you stop lying about invasive species, I'll stop telling the truth about you. Okay. So the alternative is integration biology. I've formulated this as this could be a true science which would study the same phenomena that invasionists study. It will study dispersal, how species integrate, how new species assemblages form and change, and the evolutionary consequences of this. There are tremendous research opportunities in integration biology if we just free our minds from this false fear of the non-native. And applied integration biology would be like intentionally dispersing things, like endangered species, like transport them to another place where they'll be safe and they can prosper. And, well, the top's missing. This is just image credits. So I would say, yeah, a couple of important things if you're activists. Don't let them win by making you spend your entire life fighting them, because they win that way. You have to remember it's like these simple, like I'm an old man now, and so I can tell you the really important things. It's important that you're activists, but you should love each other and dance. You'll never regret a kiss, and you'll never regret going dancing. And if I'm remembered for one thing in my life, 3 words: refrain from coercion. That's it.
Next, we're going to have a local photographer, Ken Cheetham, who's also part of our coalition what is our name? The Coalition to Defend the East Bay Forests. And Ken describes himself as an obsessive Hamilton Gulch documentarian. So we wanted to have, ground us all in getting to remember a lot of what this is about, which is our East Bay lungs. But these projects are going on all over. A third of California right now is targeted with these kinds of programs. Mount Sutro, UC San Francisco's plan has been to get rid of that whole cloud forest of eucalyptus. So far, 1,200 are down. People have been fighting for years to keep that from happening. It's the same mentality, another native plant restoration project. I'm going to grab, could you get that East Bay pesticide alert clipboard there, kind of going around more? And there's a place to check, very specifically if you'd like us to get your email or the contact info to the larger coalition that's working to stop this destruction of the hills. And it is, we have, just so you know, as they're getting ready here, everything has been tried and is underway. Every avenue has been tried. Many of us here, have been very involved for many, many years in the EIR, Environmental Impact Report, Environmental Impact State processes. People have tried going to the politicians, and every little thing you can imagine, every huge thing. HCN will update you, the Hills Conservation Network will update you later on their lawsuit. Everything's been tried. Do not go back to ground zero and think there's anything but deceit in the people who are pushing this program. Start at the much higher level we're at now and go from here. A lot of people are talking direct action now. Many people are talking civil disobedience. A lot of people are preparing themselves to block bulldozers. So, that's underway. Yeah, maybe take a question just while we're waiting to.
Yeah. Do you have any dates of when, actions either are already happening or actions are being planned?
UC Berkeley has already downed 18,000 trees in the hills here as part of this larger program. Now they were going to try, they were trying to get a FEMA grant also.
They've got trees.
I encourage you to get onto those, start coming to the meetings with the Forest Defense Group. There's stuff in the works, people are talking, yeah. And there's going to be an update later on, a real quick update about an action around Sierra Club. A lot of people are choosing in protest to discontinue their memberships and are going to do a very, very public display about that. So Ken will have these beautiful photos. Then we will move into having a presentation by David Maloney, who's right here. There he is, a firefighter. You can hear from the horse's mouth. He was on the 1991 task force appointed by the mayors of Oakland and Berkeley to be on the task force to investigate the causes of the 91 fire. So he can tell you about his experience and his experiences of the California Native Plant Society people on that investigative task force. I can tell you, as I've been preparing for this program, I've been going around to a lot of different fire stations, from San Rafael all the way over to San Leandro, actually talking with firefighters and giving them flyers about this evening. And I can tell you that there's been a great deal of interest and excitement in the idea that David's making a presentation here, but there's also been a lot of confusion. I've heard firefighters saying, oh, but eucalyptus is so dangerous and throws. So there's a lot of confusion among younger people who were not here in 1991, who were not in the hills, who actually did not know the history of the fact that that big fire was allowed to go out of control because of negligence. Oakland Fire Department did not even follow its own protocol. Did not. And so it was the winds the day after the initial little fire that had been put out. The embers were let to go, and it was not being watched over as per normal, typical protocol. And so then we had, in the grass, and then huge wind. Anybody else here that day? I was evacuated along with many others. Huge, yeah, huge winds. It was the perfect storm, right? That's why this thing got out of control. So people need to learn from that it was not the trees that started it. It was not the trees. And right now, this whole week, grass fires everywhere.
Yeah.
My daughter's aunt has been evacuated from the Clear Lake area. It's chaos around the state. It's grass fires. And eventually when things get hot enough, yes, anything will burn. But it's grass fires. And the whole plan is to convert this whole hills area to grasslands. That's the plan, grasslands. It's because it's being called native. That is the plan, grasslands. And let me also dispel what we're working on. There is no replanting in the plan. No replanting is part of the plan. Now there are people sort of saying, oh yeah, there'll be replanting. There is no replanting that is part of any official plan. None.
It's not about grasslands, it's about development. Grasslands are transitional forms of life. They're clearing the trees, and their politicians' careers have been financed by the developers. They're not representing the residents.
Well, let's say that many of us have been trying to find out the disposition of the trees, the disposition of the wood chips. We've been stonewalled. I did another couple of requests have been done the last month. We are given zero information about the disposition of any of the trees and any of the wood chips not left in the hills. Not to mention the fact that leaving wood chips around is a massive, it's a tinderbox. But none of the involved agencies will say a word, not a word. They will not answer our formal requests for information. They will not answer. But we have heard from longshore workers that ships have indeed been going out up and down the West Coast for by the tons for years. And all we can do is surmise now. There's a huge biomass market for coal-fired plants in China. There's a huge market for pellets for Europe. So we're left surmising. We're not getting exact answers, but we've got to use common sense. The hills are being sold off, and everybody's looking.
Hello, I'm going to be showing some photos of threatened trees. They're mostly on UC Berkeley land, because that's where I hike a lot. Okay, I'm going to be focusing on panoramic ridge, which is between Claremont Canyon to the south and Hamilton Gulch to the north, where Hamilton Gulch is near, is beside Strawberry Canyon. So we'll be walking from west to east along the trail that goes along the ridge, panoramic ridge. Okay, so if you start up the popular Stonewall Panoramic Trail from either near the Claremont Resort or the Clark Care UC campus, you'll be passing lots of eucalyptus on the way up the hill. Now this first part of the trip is in Claremont Canyon Regional Preserve, and so it'll be up to the East Bay Park Regional District as to what happens to these ukes. Here's a special fat uke on the first landing, popular tree. And just behind those two people there, we have a hollow uke where from time to time I've actually seen a person studying inside.
Wow.
But that particular tree is now gone. Perhaps that one tree was diseased or about to fall, but the rest of them could all be meeting this same fate. Okay, now jumping ahead quite a bit, if you make it all the way up that steep hill, you'll find yourself here on Panoramic Ridge. Now all the rest of the trees that I'll be showing are on UC Berkeley land, so their fate is in the hands of the university.
They want to develop it.
Now except for that one uke in the very back, these trees along the side are Pinus radiata Monterey pines, which are targeted for removal just like the eucalyptus. And these pines are also often in nice growth swing. This is looking north from the ridge into Hamilton Gulch, where all the tall trees here are Pinus radiata. I just want to say at this point, you may be hearing the word thinning being bandied about frequently, and you may think they're no longer going to cut so many trees. But that word comes from the December 2014 revision to the FEMA environmental statement, where that document makes it very clear that while the new thinning approach will result in fewer trees being removed in any single year, by the end of the project, it will result in, quote, the same total fuels reduction as in the original proposal, where fuels reduction, of course, means tree destruction. So apparently they do still intend to cut all or almost all of the eucalyptus and the pines like the ones you see here. But moving on, here's some more of those pines on a connector trail, and the next photo that I'll show you looking straight up those same trees in the fall. So tall trees reach more fog than shorter plants do, resulting in more precipitation of fog drip down onto other plants in the ground and also into the creeks even in a dry summer. But some people are intent on destroying these trees as insidious invaders, even though these trees have been here longer than those people.
Yes.
This brings us to bark. Trees have thick bark, which insulate them against fire, one of the main things to make trees relatively fire resistant. And a nice side effect of bark is that it comes in a wonderful variety of pleasant colors and patterns. And where a woodpecker apparently visited this tree. Now, back on the ridge, climbing up this hill underneath the pines, if you look straight back down this hill, it looks like the pines are growing all the limbs to the south only, apparently to reach across the ridge toward the sun. And this bay on the left may be benefiting from some fog drip from these same trees. One day, at the same point, here were some goats employed to clear vegetation. So this is one non-destructive technique that can be added to the mix for clearing ground fuel. This is looking straight back from that point along the ridge at the first cypress trees and pine groves you'll pass, and that's Claremont Canyon on the left. Also at the same point, we need more eucalyptus. I took this photo just after rain because I like to do that to get the vivid colors of wet plants. And this shows how eucalyptus itself has interesting combinations of colors in its bark. These, I think, are relatively young eucalyptus leaves, which do in fact have a high oil content, just like many other plants, including California bay laurel and various California chaparral scrub plants. And here's more of those ukes after the rain. I get the feeling the eucalyptus just simply isn't tidy enough for some people. They can't use a comb, chop them down. And in fact, one of the rationales for destroying the ukes is that they drop so much litter on the ground, including famously their bark, that nothing else can grow anywhere near the ukes, as you see here. And in fact, eucalyptus can be seen mingling with baylar can be seen mingling with ukes all over this area, and it's quite easy to find examples of this. And in some cases, they're cute together. And even in this very dense eucalyptus grove here, this is just above Claremont Avenue in Claremont Canyon, though it's on UC Berkeley land. From here, it looks like nothing else could grow in there, but if you do go into that grove, you'll still see bay trees all throughout there. Now, a Sierra Club position paper on the tree cuts says that the California bay laurel is, quote, struggling to survive, unquote, under tall trees that won't let it reach its full size. But this plant exists at various sizes in different forms in different places because it's versatile. I don't see it struggling here. I don't see it struggling anywhere. I see it coexisting with these ukes here, just as it coexists with the tall pines here in a taller tree format itself, and just as it exists underneath the cypress trees in a smaller shrub form. And there's lots of other coexisting going on between the officially native plants and these tall trees, like this sticky microflower with these pines. And I found this California blackberry in the middle of a pine grove, if you can take my word on that one. Now, on the other hand, the French broom and the poison hemlock are very good at quickly moving into any spot that's being cleared, especially with a sunny spot that they prefer, and is what you tend to get when you clear a tree. And so if we create a lot more of these, this one pine is probably too close to the fire trail, so then we're likely to end up with more of this jumping into the new sunny spots around the stumps before any of the new trees that are not being planted or any California chaparral can take root there. So now they could hand paint every tree stump with herbicides as they propose. The feedlot says twice a year it has to be done. And also keep cutting back when the new French broom that jumps into the new sunny spots. Or they could simply pull out litter that accumulates on the ground to reduce forest fuel, maybe every few years, though they claim that that would be hugely more expensive. Rest in peace. Now, Monterey cypress are not listed, as far as I know, as an official target species, but they're very similar to the pines in that they're both tall coniferous trees that were brought over from the Monterey Peninsula at the same time over a century ago. So I have to wonder if these are going to end up targeted as well. So I'd like to point out that the cypress groves are some of the most pleasant spots. They're the only place where I never see poison oak. Instead, there's always this nice grass that's green the whole year round, presumably from the fog drip and the shade that tall trees provide. And something else I was about to say. Okay, the 1991 firestorm started in dry grass in a residential area, and yet ostensibly to avoid another catastrophic residential fire, they're targeting these tall trees that retain more moisture from high fog in the forest. So don't ask me. So do we really want to take away the fog drip from these California bay that are perfectly happy to be shrubs. We could ask this individual as it struggles to survive. So wrapping things up here, will these cypress trees end up being targeted just like their pine cousins in the distance here? And as some organizations insist that they should be. Will these pine trees up on Chaparral Peak, the highest point along this trail, be mowed down? Will this entire area be converted into more of a herbicide study area?
Uh-huh.
Now, just wait a minute here.
And then buildings,
Yeah,
big labs.
likely. There must
No
be some
EIR.
reason. But just so you know, herbicides are just fine in this area, but no alcohol. Alcohol is too dangerous. You might spill some alcohol on a tree stump and wash the herbicides off. Or will the pines and other tall trees simply be allowed to live and to regenerate themselves as they're doing here? Okay, two more photos, now I'm done. These are both taken from Spiral Knob, the best lookout point here along Panoramic Ridge. Here's looking back along the ridge trail to the left there with Claremont Canyon to the left, and the upper Jordan Trail on the right in Hamilton Gulch. All those trees between those two trails are pretty much pine, cypress, and eucalyptus, so they could all be endangered. Here you can actually see the tall trees just making it into the fog there, where other shorter plants would not be reaching it at this moment at least. Now stepping back just 15 feet or so from this photo for my final offering, here's the Golden Gate beyond the eternal spiral. Okay. With some beloved by me sagebrush on the left. And the sagebrush is famous for being highly aromatic due to its high oil content, similar to the eucalyptus. The main point for right now is if you notice that dark tree line in the middle ground toward the left there, I believe that's pretty much all pine trees going down that whole long slope toward the UC Botanical Garden, with maybe some eucalyptus in there too. So that whole tall tree skyline could be going away, unless we stop it. So, that's all I have to show right now. You can find these trees and a link to many more photos on UC Berkeley land at this webpage, or just ask me for a slip of paper that has that on it. And so I'll leave you with that, and thank you for your attention.
So thank you so much, Ken. And now we would like to bring up David Maloney, retired Oakland Fire Department. Where is David? There's David. Retired from the Oakland Fire Department, was Chief of Fire Prevention at the Oakland Army Base, and then in 1991, he was appointed to the Mayor's Task Force. As I said before, the mayors of Berkeley and Oakland, the task force after the 91 fire to investigate the causes and then present a report. Here's David.
All right, you hear a lot of talk about eucalyptus, that eucalyptus. There's over 700 species of eucalyptus trees. The three most prevalent in the East Bay Hills are the blue gum, the dwarf blue gum, and the red gum. They all have different fire-resistant capabilities. The blue gum is highly fire-resistant. It's the third most fire-resistant tree in California. And the dwarf blue gum is less fire-resistant, and the red gum is in between the two of them. And I've explained to you very briefly what determines the fire resistance of a tree. This determination is not species-specific at all. As a matter of fact, the Fire Service doesn't have any position at all about species, native, non-native. All we do is we look at the characteristics of the tree. So you have your tree here, right? And you have your trunk, and then you have the ground floor. All right, the three determining characteristics of the resistance of a tree are how high from the ground its lowest branches are, how thick its bark is, which the previous speaker alluded to, and the moisture content of the tree itself. And the reason for that is because 41% of all fires in the natural vegetative state is grasses, bushes, shrubs, or trees. 41% of all fires in natural vegetation are solely grass fires. 37% of those fires, of the 100% of natural vegetative fires, are brush fires or brush and grass mixture fires. So that brings a total of 78% of all fires in wildlands are brush and grass mixture, or solely grass. 10% involve trees, very small number. The other 13%, 12% we haven't determined yet because of errors in the fire reporting by the local fire jurisdictions that do the reporting. Every fire district in the United States reports their fires on a fire incident report system form, and now they do it by computer. So if it's in error, then we don't get the true statistics. So 13% of them are in error, so we can't determine exactly if it's brush and grass mixture, or just grass. So what happens an overwhelming majority of the time is you have understory, floor story coming like this, going past the tree. And, let me get it. So the higher from the ground the lowest branches are, the more fire resistance of the tree. Is just logical, and the thicker the bark. Now,
Can you move to the side a little bit?
yeah.
I want to pull this book out here. I got some props here. Each one will show a little. Okay. This book here, it's an older book. It's my book. It cost me $198 back in 1991. This is the National Fire Protection Association Fire Prevention Handbook. This is the Bible of the fire service, the actual Bible of the fire service. And in every edition, oh God, for years, decades and decades, comes out every 5 to 8 years, decades and decades, this sentence has been in this book. Dried grass provides the most flammable ground fuel. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's no conditions. Dried grass provides the most flammable ground fuel. Now, why is that? The reason that is because the basic principle of flammability of anything of a Class A fuel. Class A fuel is anything that leaves ash. There's Class B, that's your liquid combustibles. Class C, energized electrical conduits, whatever, and D, exotic metals like magnesium, which brings to mind a fire that I fought. By the way, I fought at least 300 fires, and I've been in one wildland fire, Santa Cruz Mountains, 1984. And Volkswagen engines used to be made from magnesium. The engine was caught on fire, so we started putting water on it, the engine exploded. Molten metal all over, it's just a miracle none of us were hurt. But anyway, I'll get back to the business here. All right, so your Class A fuel, it's called ordinary combustibles, wood, paper, trash, plastic, now they include in that. Anything that leaves ash. So if you have a wildland fire, that's Class A fuel. The basic principle, the flammability of a Class A fuel is called the ratio, I'll put it here, ratio of surface area to volume, or density. We put in parentheses density. Now, I have some typing paper here. If we look at this here, this is 8.5 inches by 11 inches. Let's say 8 by 11 to make it easy. 8 by 11 is 88 square inches on one side, 88 square inches on the other side. It's 176 square inches of paper here.
The density is very thin, as you can see. I don't know what is it about, 100th of an inch, something like that. So my friend Jack here is going to come up, and we're going to set this on fire. And I want you to see how fast it burns. And think of this as a blade of grass, although it's bigger than a blade of grass.
Don't worry, he's a fire professional.
When I say go.
What's the most dangerous? Oh, never mind.
Magnesium.
Go.
Practice for burning your Sierra Club membership card.
You gotta do more than that.
Now watch the flame length. That's important. Grass fires, the flame length is very important. Okay, we'll put it out now. All right.
Okay.
Now we're going to make it a little denser. We're going to pretend we have a tree there.
Oh, wow.
You're going to burn your book?
Not this year. That book has a lot of good memories. I want to make sure I don't get any moisture on the paper, because moisture is the second biggest determinant of the flammability of any plant, shrub, grass, or tree. Okay, so we're going to make this a lot denser. What time did you get for that?
That was 15 seconds.
15 seconds, okay. Notice a lot less surface area, right? A lot denser, so the ratio is much less. Okay, right there.
You sure you want to do this?
No, let's go. Go.
Yeah, that, a match, it won't light.
This is how a tree behaves in a wildland fire. Very difficult to catch a tree on fire.
We need a video put online of this.
No fire. Okay?
So it went out
We
at
should
like
have
20
a video.
seconds.
20
We
seconds.
got
All right.
Flip
So,
it into the Daily Times. All right.
there you have it. You're all fire scientists now.
Yeah.
Now, let's be very clear about one thing. We say surface area, we mean the skin, whatever it is we're looking at. Well, looking at. I know. You got me paranoid here, all that talk about Nazis and the plants and all that stuff. Holy Moses. So, it's the skin, the bark of the tree. Whatever is exposed to the atmosphere, that's the surface area. Now, the other primary ingredient of the flammability of any natural vegetation is the amount of moisture that it has within it, but the amount of moisture that it collects from the atmosphere. And this is where the East Bay Hills are champions, because all over the United States, wildfire managers wish they could have what we have in the East Bay Hills. Fog coming through the Golden Gate.
Oh, wow.
The leaves of the trees, no matter what tree it is, collects that fog and drips it on the ground. We get about an average of 16 inches a year of fog drip onto the ground beneath. And that's a lot, especially in drought years like we've had now. The second characteristic of influence is wind. So if you, trees, so we have the branches high, right, or lower, depending. Trees block wind, and wind is very instrumental in propagating grass fires or grass, brush, and shrub fires. Trees block wind. So besides collecting moisture and dripping it on the ground, they block the wind, and they also block sunlight. And that's very important. The temperature of the ground underneath the tree will be much less than the temperature of that ground without a tree. What does that mean in terms of fire science? It means that if there isn't a tree there, no matter how much moisture these grasses collect overnight, it's going to be dried out on a sunny day by 10, 11 a.m. or 12 noon, and this would be ripe for a fire. But if you have a tree there, that shade is going to prolong the moisture content in those grasses probably until nightfall in the East Bay.
Wow.
And green
That's right.
grass won't burn.
You don't have to be a rocket scientist either, or a biologist. These were some of the conclusions of the commonly called Oakland-Berkeley Mayor's Firestorm Task Force, formed in 1991. We made a presentation in early 1992. And I was on the Forestry and Vegetation Management Committee along, and I have to mention his name, Sandy Kerr. I wish he was here tonight, but he's living in Australia, fantastic guy. And we had a real tough time in that committee. There were some diehard fanatics there. But most of the people who originally thought the way they thought swung over to our side and were in vote after vote after vote by rather large margins. And here are some of our conclusions. And I don't know how many of you have read the FEMA report, but you can judge for yourself if these conclusions have been followed. Okay. Page 31. The committee recommends that the most important factor in reducing fire danger in vegetation is not removing specific species of tree or plant, but regular ongoing maintenance. The high density of flammable structures contributed significantly to the spread and intensity of the Oakland Hills fire. Trees did play a role in spreading the fire, but in many cases the trees caught fire from the houses, not vice versa. Now what happened is that you would have a grass fire that produces a lot of heat. It's an interesting phenomenon, grass fires. When a blade of grass gets over 18 inches in height, the amount of heat produced geometrically increases. For every 18 degrees increase in the heat of a fire, the fire doubles in volume. But when you get to that 18-inch length of grass, boom, it goes wild. And what happened a lot is the gases, the hot gases built up underneath the eaves of the house and caused the eave to explode into flame. Okay. The current emphasis on blue gum eucalyptus and Monterey pine as culprits in the cause of the fire and calls for removal of them are an oversimplification that can lead to negative environmental consequences. This is from 1991. We urge the cities to develop a coordinated vegetation management plan that emphasizes safety, beauty, and environmental protection. Page 35. Develop a clearly illustrated vegetation management program based on scientific principles and accepted wildfire management practices. How many of you people out there have the opportunity to read my paper and rebuttal? Great, great. It's online if you want to see it. Just type my name, David Maloney, and put FEMA, FEMA, and it will pop right up. And I want to thank my friend Jack, too. He also put it up there on the web. Yeah. Page 37, rescind Berkeley's eucalyptus eradication policy. This policy is contrary to sound fire prevention practices and could be very costly and environmentally detrimental. It also misleads the public about effective vegetation management for fire protection. Page 38, provide regular brush removal as well as mulching and composting to encourage residents to maintain vegetation. Particular tree species do not pose a significant fire danger when properly maintained. So we're almost out of time here, so I just want to address another issue. You know, you have these people who they don't follow fire science principles, and they'll say, well, the bark of the eucalyptus strips down and gathers at the base of the tree. And if it's dry, they have a point. But it has to be accumulated there for 4 or 5 years. With all the moisture we have in the East Bay Hills, you can probably move that up to about 7 or 8 years as long as we get continuous moisture. And I don't see any lessening of the moisture coming in through the Golden Gate. But let's say that would happen. Let's say there was some kind of natural phenomenon and the Golden Gate slammed shut. Just pretend. All you have to do is go in and rake that bark out every 4 or 5 years. That's all you have to do. Much less cost, and you're giving people jobs, and much more environmentally safe. All right, so we talked about wind. Well, let's get into it a little bit more. How does the wind influence the propagation of the grass fire? There's 3 types of heat. There's radiant heat, which just explodes out and goes all over the place. There's convective heat, which is in a thermal stream going up. And then there's what we call conduction, which is almost like direct contact. But in any normal wildland fire, you're going to have radiant heat. So if you have, think of a blade of grass up here, my arm. And it's heat, wind is coming along and it's hitting that blade of grass. The blade of grass is on fire. It bends that blade of grass over. The wind pushes the flame farther horizontally. And it also pushes the gases and the heat farther horizontally, drying out everything in front of it. So the more wind you have, the faster the fire is going to propagate. And that's what happened up at the rag fire up there. Where was that, around Sacramento? Anybody know? The rag fire, you know all about the rag fire, don't you? Yeah, it's to push that faster. So that's why it's extremely important to have trees as a windbreak to mitigate the grass fires should they occur in the East Bay Hills. There's something else I want to mention. We had a fire in the East Bay Hills. Some of you probably know this. It started in 1971, 71, can't remember 70 or 71, almost the exact same spot as the 91 fire. The humidity was the same, the temperature was the same. We had 100 fire engines around that fire in 2 hours. We lost 33 homes, we had 100 other homes damaged, but the fire was contained. And we got periodic fires coming down through there ever since 1920. There's a big horrendous fire that came down Claremont Canyon. But in 1991, it took 12 hours to get 100 fire engines around that fire. Aha! I don't want to get into that here, I'll tell you that. But let's just keep that fact in mind. All right, I want to talk a little bit about the fire October 20th, 1991. 1991 dollars, $1.5 billion loss, and today's money, $2.75 billion. It's the 4th worst fire in U.S. history. The 7th deadliest wildland fire in terms of loss of life was that Oakland Hills fire. And so I just want to talk briefly, personally. Well, I shouldn't. Well, I mean, this grass fires, every single tree, you can see this in the NFPA, Fire Prevention Manual, is a wildlife mitigation factor. Even trees like the dwarf blue gum that go about 25 or 30 feet high, and they almost look like bushes. They collect a lot of moisture and they drip it on the ground. The red gum has a lot of bark stripping off it, but it collects a lot of moisture, acts as good windbreak, and drips a lot of, like I said, drips that on the ground. So every single tree, and this is not my opinion, basically what I'm doing is regurgitating to you what thousands and thousands of experts have come to conclude. And the conclusion is every single tree is a wildlife mitigation
Wildfire
factor.
mitigation?
Wildfire mitigation. Thank you, Jack. My right-hand man. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for him. He actually got me back into this whole thing because it got so depressing I dropped out of it for years. But anyway, here I am right now.
Welcome back.
So that's it. That's my presentation, and thank you all for listening.
From some groups working on things, and then we'll have some question and answer and discussion. First, Dan or Lynn or whomever will speak for Hills Conservation Network, which is actively and has been for years in a lawsuit. So please give us an update about that, and also we heavily encourage you to donate to help. A lawsuit is enormous expense, and I will tell you, if you don't know, University of California has a whole floor at 2nd and Montgomery in a massive, massive building in downtown San Francisco, a whole floor of attorneys. They snow under attorneys, working for environmental groups and so on. Funds are needed.
Thank you. So I'm so glad that you all are here tonight. And glad that
Closer to the microphone.
I'm sorry. I'm so glad you all are here tonight, and that I attended, and others from our group attended tonight. It's been so inspirational, and some of the things that David said really struck me about how depressing this situation is. We've been fighting this actively since 2006. Were it not for us finding this silly little environmental assessment that UC put forth that would have allowed them to cut down all of the eucalyptus, pines, and acacias in Strawberry Canyon, Claremont Canyon, and Frowning Ridge. Those trees would have been gone in 2007. After, we made a big fuss about it back then, and shockingly enough, FEMA, who we had no great expectations would have been terribly helpful, said, hey, these guys have got a point. Maybe this really isn't such a good idea. So FEMA went back to UC at that point, who was the prime mover on this, and said, hey, would you please respond to these concerns that these folks have raised? And of course, UC's response to that was no response. Instead, they went to Dianne Feinstein and had her write letters to Janet Napolitano and Craig Fugate, basically asserting that FEMA bureaucrats were simply horrific. She'd never seen anything worse in her whole life, and why didn't they just give them the money right now to cut down all the trees?
Wow.
So this went on, and finally FEMA decided, much to our surprise, well, not entirely because we were pushing like mad for this to happen, that there would be an environmental impact study as opposed to just this environmental assessment, which is a small document. That was a great thing. It was a major slap in the face for Dianne Feinstein, which made us happy in and of itself. And unfortunately, though, when it finally did come out, it was the same old stuff, which is cut down all the trees. So we went into hyperdrive mode at that point, and we were able to get, well, you all helped in getting an enormous groundswell of folks out, 13,000 comment letters to FEMA on this draft environmental impact study, which was just an incredible number by the standards of this kind of thing, 12,000 of which, according to FEMA, were opposed to the study, to the EIS. We attended a public meeting at some school in Oakland that FEMA held for public input, and it was just overwhelming. It was like 99% of the 300 people that spoke were violently opposed to what was being put forth. And it was so bad that FEMA pulled the EIS back and said, okay, we need to rework it. So we were really happy about that. In the meantime, we were fighting this battle with East Bay Parks, who had this Measure CCEIR for 19,000 acres of the ridgeline from Castro Valley in the south to Benicia area in the north. So the whole East Bay ridgeline, 19,000 acres, big deal, 20-year project. They had an EIR for that. We tried to influence them as best we could. The net result was the EIR sucked. We filed suit, and we ended up spending about a year and a half in very unpleasant negotiations with them, trying to raise enough money to keep the suit alive and not give away too many concessions. The result was that we ended up in a settlement agreement with East Bay Parks that was better than what they started off with, but still not great. And the lesson out of all that was that, in spite of all the public outcry, everybody clearly not wanting this, there's some vested interests in there that are closely connected to the power structures in this area that are causing this stuff to go on. And sadly, what we've seen, and this is the HCN thing, that we kind of don't even want to be in this position, is that you got to sue the bastards. Jack tells me that's his favorite new saying. You sue the bastards. Because the only time that they seem to take the public seriously is when you sue them. Everything else is viewed as a public relations challenge. We've had so many interactions with people from UC, from East Bay Parks, from the City of Oakland. It's all a bunch of horse pucky. The only time they seem to take us seriously is when they're sued. So at any rate, long and short of it is that the final EIS for this that we're talking about now came out, and it was ever so slightly better than the draft EIS. But it was kind of funny because the press release that came out with it said FEMA had seen the light. There would be no more clear cutting. Instead, it would be gradual, reasonable, focused on fire risk mitigation alone, nothing to do with native plant restoration. Well, that's what the press release said. Sadly, when you read the EIS, it was pretty much the same as the draft. The only difference being that for 13% of the land, they would cut down all the trees over 10 years instead of over 3 years. Big improvement.
Incremental.
So we filed suit again. Sue the bastards, I think is what they say. And so that's going on right now. Sorry for the long lead up, but I think it's important that people have some context here. So you know, when David spoke, it was like, yeah, this sucks. You know, we've been doing this for a long time, and it gets depressing. And we are just so happy that there's so many people involved in this at this point. And it's just great. You know, I saw something that there was a petition out there that somebody got 61,000 signatures on. That's phenomenal. I don't know how they did it, but it's phenomenal.
Facebook.
Whatever it is, some social
one day,
media thing.
One day.
I don't understand that stuff. So maybe that's part of the problem. So at any rate, the lawsuit, the lawsuit itself is moving along. We had but there's a wrinkle in this. So we sued these guys, and lo and behold, a month later, who should sue them also? Well, the Sierra Club. Well, why would the Sierra Club sue this document that presumably they would like? Well, we kind of think that they wanted to interfere with our ability to settle with these folks, if there's possible to have a settlement. So in fact, that is what's happened. The Sierra Club filed suit with the specific intention, as far as we can tell, to disrupt any ability we would have to talk to these folks. And in fact, we were supposed to have a meeting today with the city of Oakland that got canceled at the last minute because of the Sierra Club suit. So if any of you are thinking about burning your Sierra Club cards, let's start a bonfire, man. Just give you the bad news. So the long and short of it is that the lawsuit progresses. I don't know what's going to happen. The way it's structured right now, unless something happens to change things, a judge would rule on this in April of next year. And I should also tell you that in terms of the risk right now, it's not enough if you to use these FEMA funds. It's not enough to simply have an EIS that's currently been sued, which is kind of not such a good EIS to have anyhow. But you also have to have clearance from the state of California under CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act. That's called an EIR. So of the three agencies involved, East Bay Regional Park District, UC, and the City of Oakland, only East Bay Regional Park District has an EIR, the very one that we sued a few years ago. So they are the only one of the three agencies that could actually do any of this work, and they're hesitant right now because there's a real chance that if they spend this money, they may have to give it back. Because if we prevail in the lawsuit, it's entirely possible that FEMA will say, all bets are off, you can't do this, give us the money back. The other two agencies haven't completed CEQA work at all. That would be UC and the City of Oakland. The City of Oakland has made it clear that they intend to do an EIR. They actually want to use some of this money that they just got from the federal government to pay for this EIR. It'll probably take a year, best case, for them to do it. I would say that for the City of Oakland, the soonest they could actually start chopping down trees would be September of next year, unless somebody sues them or something like that. Could happen. For UC, though, they also don't have an EIR, but UC is notorious in our experience for playing fast and loose with the law. So it's entirely possible that what UC would do would be to file what's called a statement of no significant impact, which is would be their CEQA clearance document. And if they do that, we have 30 days to sue it. If you don't sue it, it becomes permission. So we have to constantly be watching this. And if they do it, it's going to cost a ton of money for us to sue that. So this is no fun. So the bottom line is, thank you very, very much for all your support. Understand what we're doing here. We're delighted that this coalition has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. But don't delude yourself to believe that just because we all know the truth, that the right things are going to happen. So I think, the conclusion we've come to after having done this for 9 horrific years is get the public on board as much as you can, and that is a slow, organic process, which I think is really picking up steam now, and it's great. But in the meantime, if all the trees are gone before the public's on board, you haven't really succeeded. So it's a combination of suing the bastards and preventing bad things from happening and building public support. So I think if we continue to do that, we can win this. But that's what it's going to take.
And the Claremont Conservancy were invited to be here, and they did not even afford us a reply. So,
How do we donate to the?
well, maybe you can talk with HCN after, that'd be great, or Dan. And so Tanya's going to tell you what you can do about Sierra Club right now.
So we're really upset with the Sierra Clubs suing FEMA, and we think a few other people might be as well, at least the ones we've talked to. And so we're going to burn our membership cards, those of us who have them, in front of the Sierra Club store on August 25th. We have a petition here. We really love everybody in here to sign it. It just says that we oppose the Sierra Club suing FEMA. Please read it. That this is not the way to handle it. Okay, I'll read it. I oppose the Sierra Club's active promotion of clear-cutting forests and poisoning ecosystems in the East Bay Hills through the repeated long-term application of dangerous herbicides to the hundreds of thousands of stumps. Eucalyptus, Monterey pine, Monterey cypress, acacia forests may not meet the standards of some Sierra Club leaders. But these trees provide shelter, shade, moisture, rain collection, and other ecological functions of immeasurable benefit to birds, bees, other wildlife, and people now, not in 30 years when another smaller fantasy forest might appear magically, miraculously on drought-plagued hills. I insist that the Sierra Club withdraw its lawsuit against FEMA, demanding that even more trees be cut than previously planned, and that it change its position on deforestation of the East Bay Hills, on deforestation generally, and on the dangerous use of herbicides on public lands.
So Jack from Tree Spirit was going to do a little update on the Tree Spirit project.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Jack.
Don't say that in an airport. My name is Jack Kashite, founder of Tree Spirit Project. This is a strange question, but who here is kind of, after what they've heard tonight, assuming they've been here, are kind of undecided and kind of want to learn more before they have an opinion on this whole issue? No, I'm serious, because I want to thank people for coming who are undecided. It's great that thank you. No, really, and thank you so much, actually, because it's not just us talking to ourselves, which is great. Preaching to the choir helps the choir sing louder and spread the word. I'm going to speak about that in a sec, but we need 100 people who are confused, because we've all heard that eucalyptus are invasive, dangerous, flammable trees. I heard it so much, it took me till about 4 months ago, after doing 10 years of forest advocacy work, to get involved specifically on the eucalyptus issue. I didn't know enough. And there's so much misinformation and disinformation, people need to get educated about this. And it's not, crammed down their throats as much as, I feel angry or upset about cutting down eucalyptus trees. It's not that simple. We need to spread the word. So, for the people who are here and have come to a conclusion about it, I don't know, there's 80 people in this room. Please, if you feel some fire about this, tell 5 people, 10 people, and then as whatever the math is, 500, 600, 800, 1,000 people are going to know. So, I mean, my favorite quote, I say it every time I stand up at a podium, is of course the Margaret Mead quote.
Yeah.
Never doubt
Oh, yeah.
that a group of committed individuals can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. So it's going to start in this room and spread, and of course there's more people in this room. But as much as I'm depressed, as I've learned that eucalyptus are just, wait for it, trees. They're just trees. Which as David was pointing out, when you attack them, when they are attacked and vilified, no one is listing all the benefits that all trees afford us. Sequestering carbon, creating shade, creating oxygen, animal habitat, keeping the soil moist, on and on and on. They're ultimately trees. You want to clean up the... And, I'm sorry, and 10 inches per year of fog drip rain is created in East Bay Hills. Anyway, it's 10 inches I thought East Bay, 16 in Sutra Forest.
Oh.
That's my numbers. Anyway, it doesn't matter about the numbers, because I'm not good with numbers.
And it changes.
So I could go on, but I just want to really, as much as I get really upset about trees being, that there are people that want to kill trees, and I can demonize them, and I don't want to demonize anybody. It's ignorance and fear, and there's drivers behind it, and capitalism and greed and all that stuff, sure. But most people, I think, are caught in the middle, not understanding and not knowing. So I want to balance that anger and frustration with the optimism of getting this room alive to reach 1,000 people and donate to the Hills Conservation Network's lawsuit, which we absolutely freaking need. So thank you, Dan, for fighting for 9 years on this. I want to thank the 40 people, about 40 people who were willing to strip naked, like the crazy, wonderful Berkeley tree lovers were in one of my Tree Spirit Project photographs on July 18th. The same day that there was a grass fire that jumped I-15 down at Cajon Pass in San Bernardino, showing that you don't need trees to have a wildfire around under control, as David Maloney was wonderful enough to tell us all. And Save East Bay Hills has gotten involved, and what is the name of our Max? The coalition is, that the name game is finally, is?
But I can't remember.
Exactly. No one can remember. After hours of coming up with the name, you forget what it is. Anyway, Coalition to Save East Bay Hills. Defend East Bay Forest. Beautiful people by any name. So please, whichever way you feel compelled to get involved, please do that. It can be as simple as telling your neighbors. All our websites are now up and linked, and we're expanding and sharing information. It's an educational campaign to save beautiful, blessed, amazing, our allies for thousands of years, trees. It's as simple as that. Thank you so much. Oh, and last thing. There will be, I keep getting kicked about this, there will be another much larger tree spirit photograph as well for people who want to be in a group of 200 or 300 or 400 people, with probably 500 people. Thank you, Larry. A filmmaker friend here. So we're going to do that again because it's the way to get to the media so that you get more people involved and then get to lawsuits and do all of these different parts which are necessary. Thank you everyone for being here. No date set yet, we'll let you know.
For one thing, I'm thrilled to find out that we people are integral to the well-being of Earth. So much has been said that, as previously, is that we're the cause of the problem, and I've always known we're not because I'm a deep communist. But but tonight it was emphasized that one of the causes of the problems has been the movement, the forced movement of people out of their native or whatever their location where they've been living, making things work for them. And you know why that's done, right? Why people are forced off the land and agglomerated into places where they can go to the owners' jobs and make profit for our owners, right? We become this slave group instead of becoming a kind of potential unified group of people that would serve each other and ourselves.
So my question is, how does FEMA get involved with this? They're supposed to be for emergency recovery, not prevention.
Well, what happened was money that was well-intended was hijacked. So these grants are FEMA Pre-Disaster Mitigation and Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. which FEMA set up as this proactive way to avoid major catastrophes. And somebody, and I believe it was really Tom Platt at UC, came upon this idea of, hey, why don't we stretch the definition of a disaster or a pre-disaster to include trees that are miles away from the nearest structure. And that's what happened. So FEMA kind of got dragged into this unwittingly, and I think has major regrets, but this is where we're at.
UC Berkeley lost its FEMA funding. Is this true? Because they, okay, what about Oakland? Okay.
So what happened was UC Berkeley had funding for basically all of the campus area above the Berkeley, what we think of as the Berkeley Hills, which is actually Oakland Hills. And so that was for Strawberry Canyon, Frowning Ridge, and Claremont Canyon. And what happened is in August of this year, they jumped the gun and they clear cut about 7 acres in Frowning Ridge, and we caught them. We went to FEMA and said, hey, this isn't right. They don't have permission to do this yet. FEMA came unglued, and the result of it was that FEMA said, you know what? You screwed up. We're going to take back all the money for the 160 acres in Frowning Ridge. So they basically, because they jumped the gun and made a horrible mess in the process, they lost the federal funding for the Frowning Ridge portion. But they still have the funding for Strawberry Canyon and Claremont Canyon.
What about Utilana Grizzly Peak to the east of Grizzly Peak? It looks like it's in the park area. Is it not?
The land on the summit, basically to the east, is either East Bay Parks or East Bay Mud, the water company.
Right. Really bad news.
Well, it's a complicated mix of stuff. So East Bay Parks has this Measure CC funding, which is about $1.5 million a year for 20 years, $30 million altogether, which is what we sued over under the EIR in 2013. And so they are moving forward on those projects using that money. East Bay Parks, they did. East Bay Parks, though, is counting on getting another $4 million from FEMA that would further fund the existing defined Measure CC program projects.
So I can give you a picture because I swim in Lake Hansa, and last summer I noticed these trees, these stumps, and they were from eucalyptus, and there was nothing growing around them. So this year I went and took a picture with the stumps and the super weeds. So they have been given herbicides. And, I took it the day before they got the boats out. So the super weeds are already coming up here. So I just wonder how can they get away with it? Well, you just told me.
Well, I would say, I don't need to just say the same thing over and over again, but the fact is that if there were unlimited money to file lawsuits, none of this would be happening. That's the answer. So, I encourage people who don't want this stuff to happen to cause there to be unlimited money.
Thank you so much for coming. And I've seen you did talk before, so you're like a big mentor to me to understand the situation a little better. And I really appreciate a lot of the people here who also kind of are, I'm from a younger generation, and I'm looking at this a little differently. So we've heard the problems, and I want to see some solutions. And studying the problem, I've seen a lot about the use and how the trees were planted in the first place, and looked at how we just have really bad land management practices in general.
Right.
And so I'm really curious about what would you guys do now? Because we do have a fire hazard. We do have a lot of rich white people with houses that want to get protected. And you have to look at the whole context and understand that exists. So what do we do now?
Well, first of all, you can pull up the original report that came out in 1992. Just put in Oakland-Berkeley Mayor's Firestone Task Force, 1991. There's a lot of recommendations there. You can contact your local fire department and ask them what you should do. There is an active group, I forget the name. Another website is the National Wildfire Association, and they have a lot of good ideas.
Yeah, actually, I live in the middle of many square miles of native forest. It's like Doug Fir Bay. And actually, since we're losing the oaks to sudden oak death, there's tremendous fire danger. Plus, because we've had an absence of burning. Remember, the Indians aren't here burning. Yeah, if there's a wildfire in my neighborhood, I lose everything, probably including my life. So our neighborhood, what we do is we get out there and we, trim the fire ladder on the trees by the road, so that, like, our local fire chief, as when he saw our neighborhood, he said, "I wouldn't send my men in there to die." So we're taking it seriously. We do trimming around the houses. You don't have to clear cut. It's just a matter of cutting the fire ladder, like David said. It can be done, and we're mostly taking responsibility for this ourselves.
So, as someone just learning about this, it's murky because there are so many actors involved, and it's not like I've been on logging blockades in British Columbia, and it's really clear the logging company stands to benefit from clear cutting, and so I'm just wondering who, you named in your presentation kind of the infiltration or the astroturfing of mainstream environmental organizations by chemical companies. Somebody else mentioned wood chips being possibly sold. Like, in terms of talking about this and explaining it to people, who is benefiting from this, and how is Sierra Club, for instance, and I know you may not have the answer to this, being driven by ideology, or is Monsanto somehow got their tendrils in there, or does anyone have a sense of who the beneficiaries are of this plan? The hidden.
You all just follow the money and see, like I was talking about, binary choices. This is a complex situation, and that's partly what makes it harder to fight. But I hadn't heard about this wood chip export thing, and lately I've been reading Cadillac Desert about when Los Angeles took the Owens Valley water, and it's all the same story for decades, for centuries. It's like there's multiple players, the powers that be, they make money off of these things. So, I don't know, they say like there's the 99% and the 1%. It's like, why do we do this? We've been building pyramids for the pharaohs for thousands of years, and we outnumber them 99-1. We can stop it tomorrow. We don't even have to use violence. All we have to do is all sit down and say no.
Hello, my name is Kale. I'm a beekeeper with the Alameda Beekeepers, and as spokesman for 3 million little girls who depend on the redwood, the eucalyptus, when there isn't enough flowers in people's gardens and there's not enough moisture. I just want you to think, we know about the canary and the vine that protects the viners, but the bee is the sentinel of the environment, it protects all of us. And the bees go up to the eucalyptus. The red eucalyptus is the first one to blossom, and it provides the nutritious pollen to create the good growth and for the queen bees and for the hive early in the spring, as does the lupin and the mustard and the other plants that grow naturally, even though they might be invaders. The eucalyptus are really important because they blossom around the tree as the year goes. So when they're in drought years and in pollen dearth, which is what kills our bees more than anything, the eucalyptus is the stalwart defender for the bees as it blossoms year long, following the analemma of the sun's path. So, there's this thing about save the bees and save you and me. And I'm grateful that you recovered from being burned out, and I thank you for your perseverance in doing this issue.
I have a specific question. I did read the mayor's task force report, and I know you were on the committee. You were on that
Vegetation management.
vegetation management committee, and I was a little confused about your recommendations because it says do not target Monterey pine and eucalyptus for removal, and I wasn't sure if that was meant for neighborhoods and not in the wildland areas.
No, it was meant for everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then my second question is, another recommendation was to create some sort of a fuel break between the urban and wildland interface.
Yeah, that's like a fire break.
And how would that be created?
Well, you have grasslands out there. You just take a bulldozer maybe 12 or 15 or 20 foot strip and have dirt up there.
I see.
That's your fuel break, yeah.
Then why is East Bay Regional Park District, the fire chief just sent out a press release like a day or two ago? Don't they know this? I mean, it's the fire chief.
Well, I think it would be really, I don't know why they, I don't, but I think it would be really beneficial to the public if somebody, a journalist or actually a member of the public, just asked them, this is what the National Fire Protection Association says, and this is what you said. Why is there the discrepancy?
Okay, but it takes a certain amount of knowledge to know what questions to ask. They're so, in other words, let me put it this way. I'm on a lot of, we own 2 properties in the hills in different areas, so I have access to a lot of hills conversations about the trees. And the same people are always featured in every neighborhood group as experts about the trees, and they're all saying the same thing, and it's not what we're hearing tonight. It's the trees are a fire hazard, they have to be cut down in order to protect our families and our property, and this is what Hills residents are hearing, and I hate to tell you this, but most of the people in the Hills, because they're receiving this kind of information, support removing all the trees. So,
Installing fear, just like the first speaker talked about.
right. But the thing is, the people behind these programs, they seem to have access to all the neighborhood groups, and they seem to have control over the leaders in each community. And so, and it's often a one-way conversation. For example, I'm just going to give you one example and then I'll get off the mic. I'm next door, Piedmont Pines. I live in Montclair. I posted an article by Save the East Bay Hills and the Jewels and Oakland's Crown in defense of eucalyptus trees. I finally got up the courage to do that. March. Okay, I did it. Pat me on the back a little bit. The reason why I'm saying that is because I don't want to get vilified by my neighbors. I mean, they're going to tar and feather me if I come out and say, no, I don't want the trees cut down. They're going to accuse me of endangering their families and their property. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Here's something that might answer your question. This is from a book, Burning Questions, America's Fight with Nature's Fire by David Crowell. He's a well-known authority. Quote, if too much wood was in the forest, it seemed intuitive to some people that cutting down trees must help the situation. Many pointed to the massive fires of the 1990s as evidence that not enough logging was going on. Yet throughout the 20th century, large fires had followed logging.
What's his name? David Crowell? David Carl.
Yeah, David Crowell.
The problem is, David, and everybody here, the people in the hills aren't hearing our side because they're listening to the... When I posted that article from Nathan Winograd, the only reason why I posted it is it was such a beautifully well-researched, thought-out article with links which supported all of his statements to documents. That article got 62 responses in 5 days from my neighbors. I was floored. I couldn't believe it. So what I'm saying here is that if you can find a way to reach the Hills people, the neighbors, that's what needs to happen, because in response to the Next Door Piedmont Pines article and all those replies, immediately following that, the Piedmont Pines Association, which is our version of the Claremont Canyon Conservancy in my neighborhood, posted a rebuttal. And it's a one-way posting because they have many members in the Hills who belong to that organization, and you can't reply. So it's a one-way conversation. So Robbie Neely of the Piedmont Pines Association newsletter, she writes these email newsletters. She wrote, well, there's been a lot of debate on Next Door Piedmont Pines about an article, and I knew she was talking about the one that I posted and all the replies, and she said, you know, she gave a link to Chip Johnson's hit piece on Nathan Winograd, and then she posted the East Bay Regional Park District's Dan McCormick, the fire chief's response and press release. So this is what's happening here. And anytime that, you know, they want an expert to give an opinion on the fire, they go to, you know, people like Sue Piper, who I'm sure some of you know who she is. She's, okay. Who is she? She used to be Gene Kwan's communication director. And she's been in charge of what's the name?
Everything.
And everything that has to do with wildfire. And her information gets spread out on the Panoramic Hills newsletter, the Open Forum, which is the Claremont Canyon Conservancy's newsletter, the Piedmont Pines Association, I mean, everywhere.
We have less than 10 minutes left and there's still other people.
Okay, so that's all I'm going to say. Get active. Thank you.
Hello. I have a question. All those environmental organizations which David said don't give money to, they all have very good organization with letters and with petitions. Like they come to the list and the letters are done. And it takes a minute to sign. And of course it's not the same as your personal letters, but probably the quantity matters too. And I hope you guys got the webmaster who can do this thing. Like send alerts and ask to sign, send a letter to Feinstein and whoever, to Tana, everybody involved. Can you, what? No, but still send the letters. I mean, I know it's down, but still send the letters and do petitions and do a lot of that. Okay, I hope it will be done. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bob Strader, and I'm actually on the board of the Claremont Canyon Conservancy, but I'm not here in that capacity. I just came to learn. And I'm also a steward at Carter Park. I'm also a member of the Oakland Wildland Stewards. And I discovered tonight that I'm also a Nazi bastard because I kind of believe what the science, fire science tells me, and that is that it's not about eucalyptus being a promoter of fire, or we all know that grass is where fires start. We all know that humans start most of the fires. The problem with eucalyptus is that they represent a catastrophic risk of fire, and that's really what FEMA is focused on, is eliminating that catastrophic risk. And the only way to eliminate that catastrophic risk is to eliminate the trees. Because as long as they're there, they're going to eventually cause that catastrophic risk. And I actually got involved in this issue. People were talking about being excluded, one-way communication. I actually got involved in this issue because I started asking questions on some of the blogs that were circulating about, asking about, saying that how this is all a big scam. It's a collusion, a conspiracy between native plant activists and Monsanto. But You know, I ask myself this question. What is the percentage of pesticides that Monsanto and pesticides, or pesticides in general that are used in restoration? You know, it's like 1/1000%. You know, Monsanto doesn't care about this issue. This isn't where their business is. And then people who are focused on, I mean, I thought the focus was going to be pesticides here, but obviously it wasn't. It was all about eucalyptus. If you really want to do something about pesticides, you need to go out and protest your neighborhood farmer. Because this is where the pesticides are being used. They're being broadcast over fields. You know why glyphosate has been upgraded now to a possible carcinogen? It's because you got people, field workers in South America that are being doused by it by airplanes. What's going to happen in these hills is like nothing compared to what is going on every day in the fields that provide the food that you eat. So I really think that this whole focus is misguided here. You know, if you're really concerned about the environment and pesticides, it's the farms. That's where the problem is.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to give an incredible thank you to everybody who worked to make this evening happen, because I feel like it was one of the most inspirational, educational events I've been to in a long, long time. So thank you to the speakers and the organizers. And I also want to say, I still feel like I'm trying to educate myself, and I really learned a lot tonight. But one of the things that I have a big concern about, and one of the reasons why I'm here, is I keep asking myself, what is it going to mean to the Bay Area to have hundreds of thousands of trees cut down over a short period of time with no plan to replant them? And what does it mean for the air quality in the Bay Area? And I went to the El Cerrito event yesterday, put on by a forester, I'm sorry, I don't remember his name, who was...
Jerry Kent.
Okay. And he was basically arguing in favor of the plan. But he gave a pretty good talk, I have to give him credit for that. But I asked him this question, what is it going to mean for the air quality in the Bay Area? And I was the last person to ask the question. I wasn't supposed to be the last person, but I kind of forced myself in there at the end. And his answer was something to the effect that FEMA, in their analysis, has decided that there is no effect on air quality in the Bay Area. And anyway, I'd love for the speakers tonight if they have any kind of response to this question. And the other question I have is, we face a very serious problem on this planet, is climate change. And I'd like at least one of the speakers or someone who's knowledgeable to address what cutting down hundreds of thousands of trees is going to do to the overall climate change effect. And so, you want to come to the mic?
No, but I can speak from here for a second. It's okay. You can hear me. Oh, all right. Those trees with all the stuff on the ground, like compost and stuff, it's a carbon sink. It does just what we want. It's an alternative to the kinds of things that Plan Bay Area is putting out. We need those trees. It's exactly what we want. And so some people that I know believe they're doing it to make it worse, so that people will go along with moving into these stack and packs and all the things that Plan Bay Area wants to do. Because a million trees is just going to make it much worse. But what we need are those trees, those very trees. They do a marvelous thing, and they bring this extra, carbon dioxide into the soil and use it for growing and green, etc.
I'd like to also thank everybody for putting this together. It's been a very educational evening. And I'd like to say that, yes, you can call Washington, D.C., call your legislators, your congresspeople, call Feinstein, call Boxer, call Pelosi, call Barbara Lee, call everyone you know who you think is environmentally concerned, and tell them your concerns about this. They answer the phone, they take your calls, they mark it down on a sheet. I've done that with the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We're still fighting to stop that thing, but we felt we swayed some people. And also, I also want to encourage you, if you want to burn your Sierra Club card, that's fine, but I want to encourage you to get involved with the Sierra Club. There are many people in the Sierra Club that are also very, very concerned, but we're right now the minority. We need more people like you to get involved and get active on committees in the Sierra Club. The Bay Chapter has a very active water committee. We're very opposed to desalination, something that's going to be pushed down our throat in the Sissoon Marsh. And East Bay Mud is part of a consortium that is going to be putting money towards that. Get yourself educated on these issues. We in the Sierra Club that are in the minority voice are actually growing, and we want to welcome you to come and get involved and active, and call the Sierra Club and tell them you want to get active. You don't need to say what side you're on. Just come and get active and participate, and we can change it from within. Thank you.
Go give me your contact.
Real quickly, I'm Stephanie Thomas. Well, actually, to that point, I met with a chemical expert, glyphosate in Marin County, and someone from the Sierra Club there in Marin County. They have a very progressive Sierra Club. They got Larry Bradman elected to their water board. They're going to be working toward banning glyphosate over there. So I'll just comment that there is a side of being active, getting the right people running and doing things here. But I wanted to mention something. I'll mention it because I don't know much about it. I haven't had time to research it. But someone I know, Jean Bernardi, worked on this committee for toxic waste. And there's an issue about tritium. Tritium that was released from Oakland-Berkeley labs back in the late 80s, 1980s onwards. Tritium was released for this labeling agency, was part of there. And so supposedly, I have all this packet, I made copies of it if someone wants to research it. But the tritium was apparently, in tritiated water, went into the soil, into the trees. It was surrounded by eucalyptus there. And so there's an issue of some of these, at that time, they were sending the wood chips to Korea, Japan, I believe, and they got that stopped because they were radioactive. But there also was there are some monitors, and one was a monitor after they rebuilt after the fire behind the fire station, a monitor that showed a high level of tritium. So there may be an issue here of tritium in these trees. So if someone, I have all the information here, and I haven't had time to research it. If anybody knows about anything like that, see me, and I can give you the information. I can follow it up later, but I haven't had time. So thank you.
So I'm a